My father had been gone for less than 72 hours when my brother looked me straight in the eye and said something I'll never forget. You should take whatever sentimental stuff you want now. I frowned. What are you talking about? He glanced around the living room. The house. It's getting sold. For a second, I thought I had misheard him. Dad wasn't even buried yet. Family members were still bringing food. Condolence cards were still arriving in the mail, and my brother was already talking about selling the house, not discussing it, not suggesting it, announcing it, like the decision had already been made, like he owned the place. The strange part? Nobody argued with him, not my mother, not my aunt, not my cousins, nobody. They all sat there quietly, as if Ryan had every right to decide what happened next. And maybe that's why I stayed silent too. Because my entire life, people treated Ryan like he was automatically in charge. The golden son, the favorite, the one whose opinions somehow became facts. If Ryan said something, people believed it. If Ryan wanted something, people made room for it. And if Ryan took something that wasn't his, well, people usually found a way to justify that too. I wish I could tell you this story started when Dad died. It didn't. It started years earlier, with favoritism, with excuses, with a family that spent decades convincing themselves Ryan deserved more than everyone else, including me, especially me. Growing up, I watched him get second chances I never received. I watched people overlook mistakes that would have haunted me for years, and somehow, no matter what happened, Ryan always landed on his feet. But this time was different, because this time he wasn't taking a borrowed car, or borrowed money, or borrowed attention. This time he was trying to take our father's house, the home Dad spent 40 years paying for, the home filled with every family memory we had left. And the worst part? Everyone thought the house was already his, including Ryan, including my mother, including every relative who stood in that living room nodding along. What none of them knew was that my father had left something behind. Not money, not property, not a hidden will, a single forgotten file. A file buried inside an old bank record. A file nobody had looked at in years. A file that would expose a secret my brother never saw coming. And by the time the truth came out, everything he thought belonged to him would be gone. The days after Dad's funeral felt strange, not because of grief. Grief made sense. What didn't make sense was Ryan. Every day he acted a little more like the house already belonged to him. At first it was small things. He moved Dad's office files into boxes. He removed family photographs from the hallway. He started making lists: furniture, appliances, decorations, valuables. Everything was being categorized, organized, prepared, as if he was managing an estate sale instead of mourning our father. The worst part? Nobody stopped him. Mom watched quietly. Relatives nodded along. Everyone treated Ryan like the natural decision maker, like his authority was automatic. I tried to ignore it. I told myself people were grieving. People do strange things when they're hurting. But then something happened that I couldn't ignore. One Saturday morning, I drove to the house. Dad had a collection of old letters stored in his office. I wanted to keep them. Nothing valuable, just memories. When I reached the front door, my key wouldn't work. I tried again. Nothing. Again. Nothing. A knot formed in my stomach. Then the door opened. Ryan stood there, coffee mug in hand, completely relaxed. "Oh yeah." His voice sounded casual. "I forgot to tell you." My stomach dropped. "Tell me what?" "I changed the locks." For several seconds, I just stared at him. "You changed the locks?" "Yeah." "Without telling anyone?" He shrugged. "It's easier." Easier. That word made my blood boil. Easier for who? His smile faded. "For everybody." "No. I stepped closer. Easier for you. Ryan's jaw tightened. For a brief moment, I saw irritation flash across his face. The same look he'd had since childhood whenever somebody challenged him. Nobody challenged Ryan. At least not often. Because usually people backed down. Usually people apologized. Usually people let him win. Not this time. You had no right to change the locks. His expression hardened. I'll give you a key later. Later. As if access to my childhood home was now a privilege he controlled. As if I needed permission. As if Dad's house belonged to him. Something felt wrong. Very wrong. And deep down, I think Ryan knew it too. Because people who are confident they're right don't rush. They don't hide. They don't lock doors. They certainly don't start acting like owners before legal documents exist. But Ryan was rushing. Every single day. And soon, I would learn why. 3 days later, Mom invited several relatives over. My Aunt Linda, my Uncle Frank, 2 cousins, a family friend. The living room filled with quiet conversations and coffee cups. For a moment, it almost felt normal. Then Ryan stood up and ruined it. He cleared his throat, smiled, then made an announcement. I've decided to sell the house. The room became silent, not shocked silent, more like accepting silent, as if everyone expected it, as if everyone assumed he had the authority. My aunt nodded immediately. Probably for the best. Another relative agreed. Too much upkeep. Ryan smiled. Comfortable, confident. Like a man presenting a completed decision rather than discussing options. I looked around the room. Nobody questioned him. Nobody asked whether ownership had been established. Nobody asked whether legal documents existed. Nobody asked whether Mom agreed. Nobody asked whether I agreed. The conversation moved forward as if everything had already been settled. Finally, I spoke. Who says you're selling it? Every head turned. Ryan looked annoyed immediately. The room suddenly felt uncomfortable, like I'd broken an unwritten rule. Ryan folded his arms. What does that mean? It means exactly what I asked. I leaned forward. Who says you're selling it? A long silence followed. Then Ryan laughed. Actually laughed. The house is mine, Emma. The confidence in his voice stunned me. Not because he sounded certain, because he sounded rehearsed, like he'd been saying it to himself for weeks. The house is mine. Nobody corrected him. Nobody challenged him. Even Mom remained silent. That hurt more than I expected, because silence can feel like agreement. And in that moment, Mom's silence felt very loud. Ryan continued. I've already talked to a realtor. My stomach sank. You what? The house is being listed next week. The room exploded with discussion, people talking, people offering advice, people discussing property values, people discussing market conditions, everyone talking except me, because I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Dad had spent 40 years building that home. 40 years. And Ryan was treating it like a used car, something to sell quickly, something to cash out, something to convert into money. I looked toward Dad's old office. The door was partially open. For a brief moment, I remembered something. A conversation from 2 years earlier. Dad standing in that doorway, smiling, patting the wall, then saying, "This house will always take care of the right person." At the time, I hadn't understood what he meant. Now the memory returned unexpectedly, and strangely, it stayed with me. The call came 8 days later, a Tuesday morning, 9:17 a.m. I remember the exact time because the call changed everything. I was at work reviewing reports when my phone vibrated. Unknown number. Normally, I ignored unknown numbers. For some reason, I answered. Hello? A woman's voice responded. Emma Carter? Yes. My name is Rebecca. I'm calling from First State Bank. I frowned. Okay. There was a brief pause. Then she asked a strange question. Are you the daughter of James Carter? My heart tightened. Dad. Yes. Good. Another pause. We've been attempting to locate you. Immediately, my attention sharpened. Why? The woman sounded careful, professional, almost nervous. There appears to be a file associated with your father that requires your review. I blinked. A file? Yes. What kind of file? I'm afraid I can't discuss details over the phone. The answer irritated me, but something about her tone felt serious, important. Then she said 6 words that changed everything. It's regarding the Maple Street property. Dad's house. The house Ryan was trying to sell. The house everybody thought belonged to him. Suddenly, I sat upright. My pulse quickened. What kind of file? Again, silence. Then, you should come in as soon as possible. After the call ended, I sat there staring at my phone. Confused, curious, uneasy. I had no idea what the file contained. I had no idea why the bank wanted me specifically. I had no idea that within 24 hours my brother's entire story would begin falling apart. Because buried inside an old bank archive, a forgotten document was waiting. And that document knew the truth about the house. The next morning, I drove to First State Bank. The entire drive, my mind raced. What kind of file could possibly be connected to Dad's house? And why was the bank calling me instead of Ryan? The questions wouldn't stop. By the time I parked, my stomach felt tied in knots. Inside, a woman in her 50s greeted me. Emma? I nodded. I'm Rebecca. The voice from the phone. She shook my hand and led me into a private office. Then she closed the door. Immediately, the atmosphere felt serious. Not emotional. Professional. The kind of serious that makes you sit up straighter without realizing it. Rebecca opened a folder. A very old folder. The edges were worn. The paper inside looked aged, as if nobody had touched it in years. She carefully slid it across the desk. Your father established this account 12 years ago. I frowned. 12 years? She nodded. Along with several related legal documents. My heart started beating faster. What kind of documents? Rebecca took a slow breath, then said something that made my entire body go still. Property trust documents. For several seconds, I didn't understand. The words registered, but their meaning didn't. Property trust? She nodded again, then opened the folder. Inside were signatures, official stamps, legal filings, records, pages and pages of records, every single one carrying Dad's name. I stared at them, confused, overwhelmed, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. Then Rebecca pointed to a specific paragraph. And everything changed. The Maple Street house had been transferred into a family trust 12 years ago. 12 years ago. I blinked, then read it again. And again. The words never changed. The house wasn't part of Dad's estate. It wasn't waiting to be inherited. It wasn't waiting for probate. It wasn't waiting for Ryan. Legally, it had already been placed elsewhere. Years ago, long before Dad became sick, long before anyone started discussing inheritance, long before Ryan began acting like owner. The house had never belonged to him, not for a single second. My mouth went dry. Why didn't anyone know about this? Rebecca hesitated, then answered. According to your father's instructions, these records were only to be released under specific circumstances. I stared at her. What circumstances? She slid another document forward, a handwritten instruction, Dad's handwriting. My chest tightened immediately. I recognized it instantly. The same careful handwriting from birthday cards, Christmas notes, old letters, Dad. Even after all these years, I knew it immediately. The note read, "If there is ever confusion regarding ownership of the Maple Street property, contact Emma Carter immediately." I stopped breathing. Emma Carter. Me. Not Ryan. Not Mom. Me. My eyes filled with tears, because suddenly I understood. Dad had planned for this, somehow, some way. He had seen it coming. My hands trembled as I continued reading. There was more, much more. The trust documents named a managing trustee, the person responsible for protecting the property, the person responsible for overseeing decisions, the person Dad trusted most. I expected to see a lawyer, an accountant, a bank representative, anyone. Instead, I saw my own name, Emma Carter. I stared at it, certain I was misunderstanding something, but the words remained. Emma Carter, managing trustee. The room felt unreal. 12 years. For 12 years, these documents existed. 12 years. And nobody knew. At least nobody except Dad. And apparently the bank. Rebecca smiled gently. Your father was very specific. My throat tightened. Specific about what? She opened another page. He wanted the property protected. Protected. The word echoed in my mind. Protected from what? Then I saw the answer. Written directly beneath Dad's signature. The property may not be sold without trustee approval. I read the sentence twice, then 3 times. Because suddenly everything clicked. Ryan couldn't sell the house. Legally, he couldn't. Not tomorrow, not next month, not ever. Because he wasn't the owner. He wasn't the trustee. He wasn't even listed. The confidence he'd been showing everyone, the announcements, the realtor, the lock changes, the sales discussions, all of it was built on an assumption, a completely wrong assumption. And for the first time since Dad died, I laughed. Not because it was funny, because it was unbelievable. Ryan had spent weeks acting like a king, only to discover he wasn't even on the map. But then Rebecca handed me one final document, and this one hurt. More than all the others, because it wasn't legal. It was personal. A letter. From Dad. Addressed directly to me. My chest tightened instantly. The first line shattered me. Emma, if you're reading this, then I'm no longer here to explain why I made these choices. A tear rolled down my cheek. I kept reading. You spent most of your life believing your voice mattered less than your brother's. My vision blurred. Because that sentence described my entire childhood. Dad continued. I watched it happen more times than I care to admit. The tears came faster. And one of my greatest regrets is not stopping it sooner. For a moment, the bank office disappeared. I wasn't 34 anymore. I was 12. Sitting at the dinner table, being interrupted, ignored, overlooked. While Ryan spoke and everyone listened. Dad had seen it. All those years. He had seen it. I left the bank carrying copies of everything. The trust, the instructions, the letter, the proof. By the time I reached my car, I knew exactly what I needed to do. I drove straight to the Maple Street house. When I arrived, several cars were parked outside. The realtor was there. Ryan was there. Mom was there. And two potential buyers were walking through the property. My stomach dropped. He was already showing the house. I stepped inside. Ryan looked annoyed immediately. "What's going on?" The realtor turned toward me. The buyers looked confused. I walked directly into the living room, then placed the folder on the coffee table. Ryan frowned. "What is that?" I looked him directly in the eye. "The reason you can't sell this house." The room froze. Nobody spoke. Nobody moved. Ryan laughed. Actually laughed. The same confident laugh he'd used his entire life. "Emma, stop." I slowly opened the folder, then placed the trust documents in front of him. His smile disappeared. Instantly. The confidence vanished. The color drained from his face. For the first time since Dad died. Ryan looked nervous. Very nervous. He quickly scanned the pages, then read them again. And again. The silence grew heavier. Because deep down, he already knew. The truth was sitting right in front of him, and there was no way around it. The house he thought belonged to him never did. And this was only the beginning, because the next revelation would expose why Dad made these arrangements in the first place, and that truth would hit even harder than the documents. Nobody spoke. Not Ryan, not Mom, not the realtor, not the buyers. The living room felt frozen. Ryan stared at the trust documents like they were written in another language. His hands tightened around the pages. Then he looked up. "This doesn't make sense." His voice sounded smaller now, less certain, less powerful. For the first time in weeks, he looked like someone who didn't have all the answers. I remained calm. "The documents were filed 12 years ago." Ryan shook his head. "No." I nodded. "Yes." He flipped through the papers again, searching desperately for a mistake, a loophole, an explanation, anything. But there wasn't one. The trust was real. The signatures were real. The filings were real. And most importantly, Dad's instructions were real. Ryan looked toward Mom, almost as if expecting her to rescue him, to explain everything away, to defend him, like she always had. But Mom wasn't looking at Ryan. She was looking at the floor, and somehow that scared him even more. Then I removed Dad's letter from the folder. "I think you should hear this." The room remained silent. I unfolded the pages and began reading. "If you're hearing this letter, then the trust has likely become necessary." Everyone listened. Even the buyers. Nobody moved. "I created these protections because I became concerned about decisions being made for short-term gain rather than long-term responsibility." Ryan immediately looked away. That reaction told me everything. Dad continued, "A home is more than property. A home carries memories, stability, and family history." I paused briefly, then continued. "Not everyone sees it that way." The room felt heavier. Each sentence landed harder than the last. Over the years, I noticed a pattern. Ryan's jaw tightened. Whenever financial pressure appeared, quick solutions followed. Nobody said a word, because everybody understood exactly who Dad was talking about. Ryan. The brother who constantly jumped between business ideas. The brother who borrowed money. The brother who always seemed one emergency away from needing help. The brother everyone protected. Dad wasn't exposing him out of anger. He was explaining his decision. And suddenly that difference mattered. A lot. Ryan finally snapped. This is ridiculous. His voice echoed through the room. Dad trusted me. Nobody answered. Ryan looked at Mom, then at me, then back at the papers. He trusted me. I took a deep breath, then opened another section of the file, because there was still more, much more. The bank records included supporting notes, notes Dad had collected over several years, and one of those notes explained everything. Dad had discovered Ryan's debt problems years earlier. Not small debt, serious debt, business debt, credit debt, personal loans, failed investments, the kind of debt that makes people desperate, the kind of debt that makes people see property as opportunity. I looked directly at Ryan. You never told anybody. His face went pale. The silence became its own answer. Because it was true. Dad knew. Mom knew. And apparently everyone except me knew. My stomach dropped. I looked at Mom. You knew? Tears immediately filled her eyes. She nodded, slowly, painfully. I was trying to help him. The words hit me harder than I expected, because I'd heard those words before. Not exactly, but close. Every excuse, every defense, every explanation. Always the same goal. Protect Ryan, protect Ryan, protect Ryan. Even when protecting him hurt everyone else. Dad's letter continued. Helping someone and enabling someone are not the same thing. The room became silent again. Because that sentence wasn't just about Ryan, it was about all of them. For years, everyone had confused protection with love, excuses with support, avoidance with kindness. Dad had finally stopped doing that, and now nobody could ignore it. For several minutes, nobody spoke. Then Mom surprised everyone, including herself. She stood up, slowly, carefully, as if carrying something heavy. Maybe she was. Years of guilt, years of silence, years of choices. She looked at me first, then Ryan, then the old family photos hanging on the wall. And finally she spoke. I knew your father created the trust. Ryan froze, completely froze. What? Mom nodded, tears falling freely now. I knew. The room exploded. Ryan stepped backward. You knew? She nodded again. I didn't know every detail, but I knew the house wasn't supposed to be sold. Ryan looked stunned, betrayed, confused, almost like a child discovering the world isn't what he believed. You let me think, Mom interrupted. I let myself believe things would work out. There it was. The truth. Not evil, not cruelty. Just years of avoiding difficult conversations. Years of hoping problems would solve themselves. Years of silence. The same silence Dad regretted. The same silence that had damaged our family. Mom looked toward me. Her eyes were red, exhausted, honest, for the first time in years. I'm sorry. I didn't answer immediately, not because I was angry, because I wasn't sure what to say. Some apologies arrived too late. Not worthless, just late. Very late. Still, they matter. And somehow, standing there in Dad's living room, I realized something. Mom wasn't asking for forgiveness. She was finally accepting responsibility. And that was different. Very different. The realtor quietly gathered her paperwork. The buyers left. Nobody tried to stop them. The sale was over. Finished. Dead. Ryan sat alone in Dad's chair. The chair he'd practically claimed for himself. The chair he'd treated like a throne. Now it looked different, smaller somehow, less powerful. For the first time, Ryan had nowhere to hide. No confidence, no assumptions, no automatic support, just reality. And reality can be uncomfortable, especially when you've spent years avoiding it. Eventually, he looked at me, not with anger, not with arrogance, something else. Regret. I didn't think Dad saw me that way. His voice sounded broken. I thought about that for a moment, then shook my head. He didn't. Ryan looked confused. I continued. He saw exactly who you could become if nobody ever told you no. The room became quiet, because everybody knew it was true. Dad hadn't stopped loving Ryan. He had simply stopped trusting his decisions. There's a difference. And finally, Ryan understood it. A year passed, then another. Life slowly moved forward. The house stayed in the family, exactly as Dad intended. Mom visited often, more than before. Ryan changed too, not overnight. Real change never happens overnight. But slowly. He started taking responsibility, started paying off debt, started making decisions without expecting rescue. For the first time in his life, consequences became teachers. And surprisingly, the lessons worked. As for me, I remained trustee, not because I wanted power, because Dad wanted protection. Protection for the home, protection for the family history, protection from short-term thinking. And every time I walked through the front door, I understood his decision a little more. The house wasn't valuable because of money. It was valuable because of memory, because Dad's fingerprints still existed there, in the repaired staircase, in the old workshop, in the tree he planted in the backyard. Some things can't be measured by price. Dad understood that. And in the end, that was the real reason he created the trust. Not to punish Ryan, not to reward me, but to protect something he loved before he was gone. And if there's one thing I learned from everything that happened, it's this. The truth doesn't always arrive quickly. Sometimes it waits. Sometimes it hides inside old records, forgotten folders, dusty files, documents nobody bothers to read. But eventually, the truth arrives. And when it does, it changes everything. My family thought the house was his. Then one file exposed everything. And for the first time in years, the truth finally had the last word.